And I think for me, part of the biggest realization was getting that diagnosis to feel not crazy. Well, my name is Pam Purnell, and I'm from Calgary. I grew up in central Alberta, and I moved to Calgary for university. For work, I work in functional medicine, and that is actually how I met Corey. But previous, I was working in pharmaceutical sales. And at that time is really when I started and deep dove into my health journey. I was struggling with fatigue and brain fog, and I was an athlete at the time, working and training probably 20 hours a week. And I just felt exhausted. I would look at my teammates and they weren't having the same issues. And so I started going to my GP, and he ran blood work. And throughout that time with my GP, everything came back normal. And so I was getting frustrated. And after 3 or 4 visits, he said to me, well, it likely would probably be depression because that's the only other diagnosis that it could be. And ironically, working in pharmaceutical sales, I was selling antidepressants at that time. And so the scale that all the physicians were using was called the PHQ-9. And so I filled it out, and I passed. And so I left his office, and he goes, well, if you're not going to take an antidepressant, there's not really anything else that I can do for you. And so I was still functioning, but I was exhausted, and I was having brain fog, and I just had completed university. And I would say that the stress of moving to Calgary, new city, university, working, being an athlete, my body just shut down. But what I noticed is everything started for me when I was a teenager and I had mono. And after that, I just never was the same. I was the Energizer before, the Energizer Bunny, as people called me. And then after that, I just was sleeping all the time, and I chalked it up to being a teen, and I'm tired because I'm growing. And so from there, fast forward to when I was in university, not getting answers. So I started to work with a lot of holistic practitioners, energy medicine practitioners, medical intuitives. And I definitely found benefit through working with holistic practitioners. But again, it wasn't getting to the root cause. So throughout my 20s, I was being your typical 20-year-old, carving out my career, partying, work hard, play hard. And, I was keeping up, and I was still working out. But I watched my friends. If we would go away for the weekend, they could go on no sleep and be fine. And my friends always joked. They knew if they road tripped with me that we'd have to stop at Starbucks because I lived on caffeine. That's really how I functioned. And so it was really in my 30s when things took a turn for the worse, when my fatigue became very debilitating, and my brain fog, my memory became terrible. And so by debilitating, I mean I was in a relationship and I was working, but I would come home and just feel like I would need to go to bed. I would have a quick bite to eat and then crawl into bed, and I was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. So I would just lay there and watch Netflix for hours on end. And that was not me. I was a motivated individual, and I wasn't able to work out anymore, which also was killing me because that was my daily routine. Go to work, get a workout in, feel great. And so I started seeing different practitioners, and I was seeing some naturopaths who gave me some amazing tools, one being vitamin IVs, which gave my immune system a boost and helped me to function. And that was so important to help me function. But I also knew I had to get to the bottom of what was going on. And at that time, I had found a new GP, and she was open and receptive and sent me to a rheumatologist. And the rheumatologist, this was such a frustrating experience. He didn't look at me. He just looked at his computer and went through his list of 15 questions and then said, you have fibromyalgia. And I said, aren't you going to do any other testing? And he goes, well, no. In my professional opinion, I've been doing this for 40 years. I just know. And so, like many other appointments, I'd go sit in my car and cry after because I was so frustrated. And so I went back to my GP and said, okay, well, here's what he said, but I just feel like this isn't right. And my GP said, look, you've seen a lot of smart people, and if that's the diagnosis, then that's the diagnosis, and that's all that we can do to help you. And so I just really felt like it was all up to me to figure out my own health issues. So I was definitely searching throughout that time because I was feeling so crappy during that time. But definitely that was the sticking point where I became so frustrated and just really felt like I've got no other options right now. And synchronistically, through work, I met Corey, and I remember sitting across the table from him and speaking with him, and he was so well-versed in tests, and so you could just tell he was able to put the puzzle pieces together, which a lot of other practitioners couldn't. And so after I met with him, I said, I need to have a consult with Corey, because I could tell he saw things from a different lens. And I love that he starts with a brain scan. So I would say the biggest reason I really wanted to work with Corey was he was open and receptive. I'd been to other functional practitioners who I felt it was almost my way or the highway with them. And after searching for answers for so long with my health, I really felt like I became well-versed, and I have a high level of understanding. And so I wanted someone that was going to be a consultant with me and give me the tools and listen to what I had to say. That was the other big thing is, some of the symptoms I brought up, other practitioners would brush off, whereas I felt like Corey really listened and took all the symptoms into account. My first meeting with Corey was awesome, and particularly because it was long. It was 2 hours. We reviewed the QEEG brain scan, and I love that because it showed in my brain what was happening in my body, and right away it showed the immune dysregulation that was happening. And what I really appreciated is that Corey was able to connect the dots from the brain scan to my symptoms. And part of the issue that I found before with functional testing, it was a bit of a guessing game. And so the practitioner would say, I think we should do this, or I think we should do that. Well, I'd already spent a lot of money on guessing, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And so with the brain scan, it really narrowed down and gave us a focused area to deep dive into the testing. And the brain scan showed, okay, it was immune dysregulation. So from there, Corey said it could be one of two things or both. Turned out that the diagnosis was mold and Lyme, which he said after the brain scan, it showed very clearly. But again, I was able to spend the money where we needed to and not just play that guessing game. I'd been looking around at seeing a functional doctor for a long time, so I knew what the costs were going to be, and I knew if I was going to make that investment that it had to be with the right practitioner. And I had met with some other functional practitioners, and I just didn't get the same sense. With Corey, I brought him in my binder, which was 2 inches thick, which had all my tests and all my results, and I felt like he was the first person that could look at it and really put all the puzzle pieces together. The biggest win would be getting the diagnosis, right? It took 20 years to get there, and having the diagnosis made me feel like I wasn't crazy anymore. And then the other major win is getting the right treatment. I'm starting to feel better. I'm getting my energy back, my stamina. I no longer have to come home and go to bed at 6 p.m. and I feel like I can function on weekends. And I'm not fully there yet. I'm still in the treatment process, but I see the light at the end of the tunnel, which I haven't seen for a long time. My fatigue would have gotten worse. My brain fog would have continued to get worse. And I mean, for myself, going on disability really wasn't an option for work. And so I was at a point where I had to make a decision, either find answers or change jobs, which I really didn't want to do. So had I not seen Corey, I would have kept going down a path of being unwell and being in a situation where I felt very isolated because I just didn't have the energy to see my friends and family nearly as much as I used to. The advice I have is that the answers are out there. It's just finding the right practitioner. And also, our bodies just don't break down for no reason. There's an underlying issue. In my case, it was viruses, bacteria, and parasites. And once you have the answer, you can really take the necessary steps to get better. So you need to empower yourself. And sometimes that means going through private healthcare and spending the money. But that's the only way you're going to get better. So don't give up hope and just keep searching. And I really recommend Neurvana Health because they've changed my life.